My name is Ben Byrne, and I have travelled through time back to the start of the Eldritch Lorecast to tell you that this week we are talking about time travel. We are talking about sweet D&D merchandise and the first free chapter of the Radiant Citadel. All that and more right now. Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 D&D podcast in all the spheres. And by spheres, I mean Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Twitch, YouTube, all the places where good podcasts are found. Pardon me. My name is Ben Byrne and I am here as always with Dael Kingsmill, James Hake, Shawn Merwin. One day I'm going to mess up your names real bad. I've said James Merwin a couple times in my head before it's finally come out. But James Hake, I have to ask, if you were going to transform into a monstrous creature, something like a werewolf, a vampire, a lich, or something maybe not so monstrous, like a fey creature, something kind of nice, what do you think you would want to transform into?
Well, if we have all of these lovely Grim Hollow transformations on the table, then absolutely vampire is my choice. I don't want to live the rest of my eternal undead life as a moldering bag of bones, regardless of how much arcane power it gives me. Vampires, however, generally known for their charm, their slyness, their charisma, and their innate capability of living in very nice, well-insulated castles with a nice cape. Really, I saved the best for last. It's the cape I'm looking for. Actually, forget the transformation. Can I have a cape, please?
Yeah, you can transform into man who wears cape.
You can just buy them, right?
Yeah, this doesn't need to be a
That seems too easy, Dael.
You don't have to be damned.
It's about self-confidence. If you're a vampire, you've got the self-confidence to wear a cape in public. Shawn Merwin, what would you want to transform in? Hey, that's my line.
Just read down the wrong pipe.
I'm choking on the blood of my enemies.
I would transform into a paramedic so I could save James's life. Yeah,
fair enough.
Actually, I think I would love to turn into a fey creature. I think it would be fun to sprinkle dust on something and watch the madness ensue, or skip through the woods and watch flowers bloom in my footsteps. That sort of thing. Because I'm pretty much the anti-fey in real life. I'm sort of clumpy and it would just be a nice transition.
Right. I was wondering what you meant by anti-fey, the description clumpy being what we're going with there. Your words, not mine. Dael Kingsmill, if you could transform into any sort of creature, what would it be?
Werewolf. I have strong feelings about this. I read this question on the sheet yesterday, and I was like, well, this is, I can't say that I thought any words, because mostly I just kind of went feral, because I was like, foaming at the mouth at the idea of getting to be a werewolf.
Transformation.
I am wearing a werewolf shirt today in honor of how much I want to be a werewolf. I don't know if you know this, I have a web series that was a year-long web series about werewolves. I love werewolves. I want to be a werewolf.
What is it about werewolves that you love specifically?
Genuinely can't explain. I suspect that it's rooted in being like one of those dog kids. You know, the kids who just spend a lot of time pretending to be dogs.
Yeah, totally.
I was one of those kids.
Gotcha.
And when I was in preschool, my friendship group, we were the cool group, and we were the werewolf gang. And just never let it go.
Never let go. We'll always remember the werewolf gang. My partner is a dog person as well, and I have to struggle as a game master. I have to get more creative when they're traveling through the woods, because I can't have them fight wolves, because she can't it's like an X card kind of hard line for her. She can't have them have the party fight or harm dogs or wolves in any way. And every time I think, wouldn't it be awesome if there was like a pack of winter wolves that, no, they're a pack of winter cats. Like, as long as I describe the monster as being a cat, everything is A-okay, except for werewolves. Werewolves, like, as long as it's a slightly monstrous wolf, as long as it's kind of not fully canine-like, it's okay. It's on the table. But any sort of actual wolf-like creature, off the table. I'm just kind of curious because this question did come from the transformation rules from Grim Hollow, which I haven't dived into fully yet. I've sort of played with a couple of concepts around it. Have any of you, whether you're using the Grim Hollow rules or not, had players, like how often, Dael, do you have the player that comes to you and says, this campaign, I want to play a Mind Flayer or a Lich or a like whatever X non-player character thing is, and how have you dealt with that in the past?
I largely have not had to deal with that because the people I've run for have been the kind who are perfectly happy with their tieflings and their tabaxi and, your player character versions of that, if that makes sense. And, they deserve it. They're allowed. Good. But, I always, things like transforming into a werewolf or I like to keep those things on the table. I like to have them as a possible like event that could happen to a person. And largely, I'm very sad to say that people it hasn't happened. One of my favorite ones of those, though, is even just, I have a sort of a house rule that there is a possibility when you fight a beholder that you could end up being an aberrant mind sorcerer just by the sheer weirdness of reality getting so close to this thing. So I like having transformations available. I think I think it's fun. I like that kind of stuff.
Well, I'll broaden out the question slightly because you've reminded me of there was a campaign that I ran where I was like, the village man number X wants you to go do this quest for him. My brother has gone missing and he had X MacGuffin with him and I need you to go find him. I'm so worried about him and bring him back. And then throw it. And this was a brand new group that never played D&D before. I was like, all right, so how would you like to respond to Village Man number X? And they were like, we kill him and steal his stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is going to be one of those groups. Anyway, they went on the big bad of this low level campaign was a beholder, and the idea was that you had to stop the ritual that would summon the beholder into the chamber. They helped the ritual, and then they were like, oh, we swear fealty to this beholder because we want power. And I was like, all right, everybody take a level. Everybody levels up right now, but you have to level up into one level of Warlock, Pact of the Great Old One. Shawn, how often have you played with the players, character sheet yourself from the GM side of the screen?
Quite often, but it's been many years. Back in first, second edition, even a little bit in third edition days, we didn't have this numerous ability to be tabaxi and tieflings and so on. So I remember playing games where DMing and playing games where the characters were centaurs, the characters were ogres, the characters were monsters. I think the love of that has encouraged game designers to make races that scratch that itch in a more elegant way than we did it back in the day, which was, well, you're an ogre, but just add some fighter levels. What could go wrong? Well, lots can go wrong game balance wise. But it's something that I think every player who plays long enough has an itch that they want to scratch that's of that nature.
I'm thinking back to all of the campaigns I've played, and much like Dael, I think I've had some very ruly players as opposed to unruly players who've really been quite good about taking the book at face value. And there was one time in college, I was playing a D&D campaign in which I really wanted to push the idea of non-traditional player races, and so a lot of monstrous creatures were on the table. That was a ton of fun. It was very fun to sort of play as underdog monsters in a sort of underclass in a world ruled by elves, dwarves, halflings, and humans. And there was a very sort of Rebel Alliance versus the Empire feel to it that I enjoyed quite a bit. But beyond that, no, I've never had that sort of much derided experience where you roll into town with a human, an elf, a dwarf, and a thri-kreen. And you're like, okay, well, now everyone in town reacts with utter fear and suspicion towards the bug man who's in your party. And we'll have to sort of grind everything to a halt for every mundane little podunk town you go to, so we can deal with the realism of dirt farming peasants not knowing what your bug guy is. And it's like, yeah, that is a problem. That is a problem if you play that way, and that's a very thorny problem. You have to sort out. I'm very lucky that I've never had to sort it out.
Sure.
Perhaps I could have sorted it out if it arose with a good session zero. So go ahead, Shawn.
Worse than that is the Thrycreen character comes into town, to a town that is overrun, or the fields are being dug up by Thrycreen. Which is what happens in a lot of cases in campaigns where the monsters and the monster manual and the player's handbook overlap a lot. That is something that comes up that is even harder to deal with and harder to reconcile if you want your narrative to cling to any hope of realism in that sense.
Sure.
Well, it was very prominent in the third edition days, especially when a lot of the humanoid creatures in the monster manual had a little bit of guidance on how to play as that creature as a player character. Confusing guidance, I should add. I had no idea how bonus hit dice and level adjustment, stacked on top of one another. I don't think that was stated very clearly at all. Sorry, now I'm just griping about old editions. That's not interesting to anyone. That's not good radio.
I don't know. You might be surprised. I've done the same thing. I'm even kind of stricter with it than Thrycreen, though, in terms of like not wanting tabaxi or even like Dragonborn or Tieflings within the campaigns that I run as player characters, because the theory being that if you've got strange fantasy monsters in the party already, it becomes a lot less strange to encounter them in the campaign, because it's like, I think I've had this conversation before, but it's like, oh, there's a cat person over there. Well, that's not shocking. Jim's a cat person, and he's with us all the time. The one time this worked out for me really well was similar to what you were saying, Joey, was when I was like, no Dragonborn, like stay away from Dragonborn completely. And the party were like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. I make a dwarf, I make a halfling, I make an elf, blah, 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 blah. And then I ran kind of a version of Horde of the Dragon Queen, which was really somebody else ran Horde of the Dragon Queen for me, and then I ran my version of what they ran. So I have never read Horde of the Dragon Queen, but there's the moment where the Dragonborn rocks up right at the start and like challenges someone to a duel. And as soon as this Dragonborn kind of comes out of the crowd, I'm like, you see this hulking figure covered in scales. One party member went, what is that thing? And the other party member went, hey, I thought you said there were no Dragonborn within this setting. But it worked in terms of like building this character up, but then ran the same scenario. I've run it like 4 or 5 times now. And whenever there's a Dragonborn in the party, it actually ends up working really well, where the party get this weird shoo-in with the cultists that are supporting the Dragon Queen, because nobody else has ever seen a Dragonborn before. So if there's a Dragonborn in the party, then all the cultists are just like, oh, I must worship? What's going on here? I'm so confused. So that can work out well, but it does take a little bit of yes ending from the players as much as the GM.
Can I just say that it's very charming that you call them Tieflings?
Tieflings? Tieflings?
You say it however you want.
Okay, I will. Tiefling and Dragonborn. That's the Australian pronunciation. Dragonborn. Anyway, speaking of different pronunciations. No, let me go again. Speaking of awesome content, Radiant Citadel has released its first chapter on D&D Beyond 6. I'll take it. I'll take the 6. D&D Beyond has released the first chapter of the Radiant Citadel as a digital download. It's not really a download, but a digital content pack for anybody that has D&D Beyond. It's free. You can go get it right now. It's not one of the adventures from Radiant Citadel. It is the Radiant Citadel itself. It's sort of a city that is there for you to use as a hub in your campaign world if you wish to, or kind of a primer for those who think that they might run Radiant Citadel. Has anybody looked at it? Has anybody had a read through it?
I've given it a scan, and can I just say how much I love the ruby pangolin and how much I want him in real life as a pet that I can hold close to my chest and give little kisses to his little head every day.
I can't imagine snuggling with a ruby pangolin would be particularly warm though. Like, isn't like precious stone cold to the hug?
Depends on where you store them overnight. Near the heater.
That's true. I was muted. I need to repeat what I just said. If you microwave your ruby pangolin first, it'll be nice and warm for you to.
Please do not microwave your ruby pangolin.
We are required by law to tell you: do not microwave your ruby pangolin.
Yeah, the art for it's super cool.
I've got to run. Just a second. Hang on.
See a microwave stop beeping in the background.
It's very cool to see Wizards basically come out with a new setting like this. It's not something that we've seen in a while. If you don't count the Critical Role settings, which are new to D&D, but were introduced in another medium. I'm trying to think if this is the first completely new D&D setting. Maybe we can call it a micro setting since Nintir Vale in 4th edition. Is this the first completely brand new 5e setting from Wizards of the Coast? I think it is.
I was about to say Taldore, but then you said Wizards.
Oh yeah, well those were introduced in another medium first as well.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
So yeah, it's just a remarkable thing. It I don't really know what it indicates. We've had Ray Winninger, the head of the D&D team, talk about introducing new settings to 5th edition, but typically we've assumed that he's talking about old settings. We've had our Spelljammer announcement, we've had our Dragonlance announcement, and he did say that old settings were coming back. But this is something completely different.
Is this as big as that, though? Is this a new campaign setting? Because my impression of it, and again, you've probably read more of it than me, so you can clarify. My impression was the idea was that the Radiant Citadel is a city that sort of sits on the astral plane or on the ethereal sea. It's a place that's kind of connected to other places. It could almost have connections to Spelljammers a little later on in the year. Or be used, if you're not interested in Radiant Citadel, the adventure book for whatever reason, you can go onto D&D Beyond and just grab this and use it in your Spelljammer campaign or any other campaign where you might be plane hopping around. Is it as big as a new setting, or is this just kind of a new space to exist within?
It's definitely a new city. And this first chapter is really about the city and its factions. And that, to me, I think is the most important part, is that it's not just telling you about a place, but it's telling you about the character details of the place as well. This is the sort of stuff that a DM has to know when running the Radiant Citadel, not just like where the different portals go to, but who are the various people that control the setting? What are their sigils? What are their motivations and desires? And that's really what the setting is getting at. That's what all of these gemstone creatures are. They're symbols of the various maybe factions is too strong a word, but the various peoples that are within the Citadel.
Yeah, I think it's a new setting in the sense that maybe Planescape is a new setting or was a new setting, because what it is, it's a city that connects both things that we already know about and things that we don't yet know about, because the civilizations that built this place, 27 civilizations, came together to build this city. But we don't know what those 27 civilizations were. And I think 15 that came back after the city had been left for ages, it says. We don't know where those 15 civilizations are. Are they in known worlds? Probably some are. Are some in worlds we've never seen before? Probably. So in that sense, it is introducing not just a new setting, small setting, but potentially new larger settings or settings that will be left over for the game masters to build on their own.
Is Radiant Citadel the adventure book? That's not all Forgotten Realms, is it? That's all sorts of, like, that could itself kind of tie into some of these different cultures that you're talking about, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, we'll have to assume much of all of this is still completely
speculation.
Yeah. I think it makes sense. So this is a book that has been touted as an exploration of a lot of different new realms and cultures and civilizations in the D&D world that are, of course, drawn from the sort of fantastical imaginings of people from Earth cultures that are not very frequently represented in D&D style Western fantasy. So I can only imagine that some of these cultures here on the Radiant Citadel are the ones that bring in those sort of Mexican-inspired Dia de los Muertos fantasy ideas, more Indian-inspired fantasy ideas, stuff like that, without being direct analogs for that Earth culture. That's always a very tough line to walk, and it's often where D&D designers, typically white D&D designers, white American D&D designers, get into hot water. I think I think many people can look back at, say, Maztica, the sort of Mesoamerican inspired corner of the Forgotten Realms, as being just a sort of stereotype filled, offensive bit of blah that doesn't contribute much to the Forgotten Realms setting. In fact, many would say it detracts from it.
Sure.
This, when you bring in actual authors who come from that culture, the hope is that what they design is more in the realm of a respectful, loving take on that culture, rather than someone who's read a few textbooks about Sengoku period Japan and now is an expert on all things Japanese history, mythology, and culture and stuff like that.
The thing that I noted earlier this week, just sort of slightly changing topic, was that the Vecna dossier no longer available on D&D Beyond. It is gone. It was limited time only. I'm not sure if they said that ahead of time. They might have flagged that was. Is it the same with Radiant Citadel? This first free chapter, is this limited as well?
I believe it is, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm fairly sure, yes.
This could be a 2-minute conversation. This could be a longer conversation, but it just fascinates me so much, is this whole digital rights concept again, because the thing with the Vecna dossier is that, as far as I know, and I'm open to being corrected on this, Vecna gone. If you didn't get that dossier, Vecna gone. There is no way to get access to Vecna currently. And in a couple of months, I might be corrected because they might release an adventure or something with Vecna in it. But with the thought process that for whatever reason, Vecna's he's no longer relevant to the conversation. He's no longer relevant to pop culture, which I don't think is going to happen with Vecna anymore. He's here to stay. He can stay. The lovable guy. But how do we feel about this concept of Wizards and any kind of publisher kind of releasing these limited time, get it while it's hot, or you can't get it at all style content?
The video game world had this conversation maybe last year or something like that, when Nintendo released a collection of 3 Super Mario titles for an anniversary.
Right.
The anniversary edition collection of Super Mario 64 for the N64, Super Mario Sunshine for the GameCube, and Super Mario Galaxy for the Wii, all from their back catalog. All games that have seen re-release on other platforms and that are, less than legally acquirable for free on the internet. And they made the decision to make that a game that you pay a certain amount of money for. It wasn't free like what Wizards is doing.
Sure.
But if you didn't buy it within that window, you never were able to get that piece of software in that format again. And it's certainly a marketing strategy, right? The sort of artificial scarcity. They didn't have to take it away after that time, but they chose to. Artificial scarcity is certainly a way of goading people to buy a product they might not otherwise have. But I am surprised to see Wizards and D&D Beyond doing this, because Nintendo received an enormous amount of fan backlash for this strategy. People really were not happy that this happened. And I think the main difference possibly here is that this is a free product. All you have to do is kind of be plugged into the culture and click a button, then you have it forever, and it's all free.
Just quickly clarifying, you don't need a D&D Beyond like pro subscription to be able to access this content. You just need to have an account.
That's a good question. I'm sort of grandfathered into having a D&D Beyond pro subscription because I work for them.
I think that it was.
So I don't know for sure. Well, quick, someone sign up for a free account right now.
Quickly.
Let's do this.
Yeah. Someone in the chat confirm for us.
But no, I think that you touched on something really interesting there, James. Part of the reason that I think that this is maybe not a bad strategy for D&D Beyond is that, okay, so Dante is saying content as far as he knows is not subscription locked. So
yeah, there you go. Free for anyone who wants to grab it.
That was my understanding of it. But again, I just could be straight up wrong about that.
I think just to clarify, I mean, again, I could be wrong, but I think you need to have an account.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, but you can have an account by clicking sign in with Google. You know what I mean? Like it's
sure.
You know. But I think it's really interesting that you said that you just have to be plugged into the culture. I think that's part of why this is an interesting strategy for D&D Beyond, is that it's encouraging engagement with the community and it's rewarding engagement with the community. Because if you are on Twitter talking about D&D, you're going to see people talking about this and you're going to go and you're going to check it out. And it's free and they hand it to you. And the other thing that I think is neat is that from my perspective, I could just be wrong, but from my perspective, it seems as though it's not about giving it to you if you were there during that time and then taking it away and you can never access it again. What it is doing is going, okay, here, you can have this thing to use on D&D Beyond if you access it during this time, right? Because people are going to have screenshots or, transcriptions or blog posts about it that they can use at their kitchen table. And I don't think that there's any sign that they're going to chase that down and, nip it in the bud or anything like that. So it doesn't even feel like it's, it doesn't have that sort of stamp of extreme copyright protection and IP on it that I think you can see in other places like maybe Nintendo.
As soon as a free thing is given away, the marketing person that I was says, why are they doing this? There's a reason for this.
Yeah.
And the reason for this is, as we've been sort of skirting around the issue, is emails are worth things. Emails are worth things in this world. Email, as old as it is still valuable marketing wise. Yeah. To get that free content, you didn't need a subscription. You just needed to give them your email address. And now they have your email address. And so when things come out, they can email you and let you know. Of course, allowing you to opt out if you choose not to get their information, but most people go ahead and get it anyway. And I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah, when Dael was like, all you need to do is like click with your Google account, I was like, yeah, but they get your Google details.
Well, that's just it though. Like, isn't that the cleverest form of it, right? Because signing up with your email is something that requires enough steps that you stop and you think about it. But clicking sign in with Google, one step process, you're already signed into everything else with Google. So it doesn't feel as though it's a big deal. It's very clever in terms of, marketing and those sort of data collection elements. I do think I want to talk more about this, this sort of artificial scarcity concept, or so there are the four persuasive methods. You've got ethos, pathos, etc. One of them that gets left out a lot of the time is logos, which is convincing people through time. And we see it all the time, but less in like political speeches so much as we see it in sales tactics. Get it now, 50% off for the rest of this week, right? You can this is the summer sale, Black Friday sale. That sense of this is temporary and I have to jump in now is an interesting thing to see applied to free products.
The fact that it's free really makes all the difference in the world here. It's why I don't think they're going to see much, if any, backlash for this, because how can you get mad at someone for giving something away for free? It's a free sample. You're not going to go to Costco and say, why aren't you giving me this next week? You'll take it this week.
There was that U2 example where they forcibly put their album on everyone's iPod, but
I remember that. I remember going, what the hell is this?
You. Your Wizards is asking you. You have to be on it. And I think something about that limited time aspect of it cues into something that you were talking about, Dael, which I think is a really important part of this, is plugging into the current conversation. Vecna was doing two things. It was plugging into the current conversation that Stranger Things began, but it was doing something else, which we now see being the main drive, this Radiant Citadel one. It's creating a conversation within the D&D community. It's doing its best to get this piece of content in front of as many people as it can in the fewest steps possible, so that people will start talking about it. And that's such a clever way of advertising, because it's hardly advertising at all. It's like making your own word of mouth. And I can't even be like cynical about it, because if the content's good, then of course people will talk about it. And if it's not, they won't. It's just great.
I love how often we end up just delving into marketing and capitalism. But like, again, it's like even the people I saw complaining about the way that Vecna was written, you still, if they put that out there, then the people who want to engage with that conversation have to go and sign up to D&D Beyond with their one click on their Google account in order to read it. And that it's so smart. It is really, really smart. I'm not making a moral call on it one way or the other, but it's very clever advertising. And it's really emphasizing that like ease of use, right? It's so easy to get you onto D&D Beyond, and now you're on D&D Beyond. You may as well use it the next time you have a game. Like,
and there's a third aspect of it. It's onboarded you already.
Right. And notice how clever what they were giving in both of these cases is. One of the biggest complaints I hear from established players is there's no high level content. There's no high level adventures out there. So who do they want to pull in to that conversation? They want the established player who's going to pour over the stat block and who's going to want to run that adventure for their high level characters. With the Radiant Citadel, they're giving out this sneak preview. Who do they want to get with that? They want to get the people who, are going to be into sort of this, I don't want to say utopia, because it's not quite a utopia, but it's definitely as utopian a setting as we are likely to see coming out of a game designer's mind. And so that they're not giving an adventure, they're not giving stat blocks, they're giving this description of this utopic society. And it's marketed right for the people. And what is at the bottom of this article? Pre-order. Click here to pre-order, right? There's nothing on the Vecna article that said, go here and buy this other thing. It was just, boom. It was the content that audience wanted. And this is the lost leader to what they want, which is for people to buy this new book based on this description of the city.
Yeah, it's a very smart tactic from Wizards. And honestly, I think it's pretty good for the consumer as well to get a little bit of the book for free, and a not insubstantial chunk of the book for free. And in Vecna's case, actual game design that people want to talk about and use and play with. I guess, and I should say, I hope they keep doing stuff like this, and I hope it remains as good as they've been doing it so far. I hope they don't start just releasing, whatever, that it stays with this level of quality they've established here.
Well, that's the question, right? Is where is this leading? Because I think it's leading somewhere, and I don't think it's necessarily like, the cynical play is like DLC for an adventure, which, to be fair, already sort of exists on the DM's Guild. Like with the and my understanding of this is cursory, so somebody pardon me, can once again correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea of like the Adventurers League seasons is that they're tied to an adventure module that gets released, such as Tomb of Annihilation, and then a whole bunch of extra content comes out on DM's Guild for Tomb of Annihilation and I'm not sure whether that's authored by Wizards or authored by freelancers working for Wizards or just people using the Open Games license and the DM's Guild license to create content for Adventurers League. Shawn, you probably have a better insight into that than me. I'm just curious if they start doing, non-DM's Guild style D&D Beyond specific, like a DLC for adventures that become purchasable, and whether they are only purchasable during like that season of Adventurers League. And this is rampant speculation that I have veered off the road violently into, but
well, Shawn's got to talk about Dragon of Icefire Peak now.
Yeah, James teed me up there. Thank you. They've already done this with Dragons of Icefire Peak. When you bought your box set at Target, the Essentials kit, and you ran that first adventure, there was a sheet inside where it said, if you would like further adventures, you can use this code on D&D Beyond to get the next 3 adventures in this series for free. And so they've already been experimenting with that with D&D Beyond, and this was before they owned D&D Beyond even. So now they're even more tightly integrated, and I could definitely see something more done along those lines.
And that's where it gets hard with, it starts to look more and more like the video game industry, where I remember this was 5-10 years ago now, but when Watch Dogs came out, that was like a kind of a crucible point. Is that the right word? I'm not sure. Anyway, where you needed a chart to be able to know what you were getting specifically in your purchase of this video game, because one version came with a hat and pants and a toothbrush for the main character, but if you brought this version, you only got the hat and the toothbrush, you didn't get the pants. But if you brought this version, then you didn't get any of it, but you got this other extraneous thing. And who knows if we're going to end up there necessarily with D&D content.
I would love it if buying the right version of the Ruby Citadel got me a hat and pants.
I want to get my official Strahd von Zarovich cape, please.
The cape.
If you get the super deluxe, you get your Ruby Pangolin with the warning label, "Do not microwave."
Do not microwave.
Ben, just so you notice that Dael teed you up there for a 10 transition.
Yes.
I missed it.
If I could get the right version of the Ruby Citadel that would get me a hat and pants, merch to go with it.
Well, speaking of hats and pants, you might put your hat and your pants on before you have breakfast in the morning. Dael, do you enjoy breakfast?
This to me? I didn't make a 1 score. I can't go lower.
I'm just asking the questions. Are you a breakfast person?
No,
do you enjoy
I'm not
breakfast?
A breakfast person. I choose sleep over breakfast every time we do this podcast.
No, that's a 10. You're just covering. You're just the way you're choosing to hold the card. I did. I just saw it on camera. All right, no, that's all right. You're not a breakfast person. That's cool. Are you a coffee person? Or a tea person? You like
no.
Soup? Do you
hot
go on nice soup?
You want hot chocolate? Hot chocolate.
Yeah. You enjoy hot chocolate? How about, would you drink hot chocolate from a bowl?
Benjamin. I'm so tired.
All right, I'm moving on. James,
really
are you a breakfast person? Do you enjoy your breakfast cereal? You enjoy your sugary Australian American breakfast cereals?
No. Next question.
Australian American.
You're killing me here. You're killing me.
I enjoy a nice fruit smoothie in the morning, Ben.
There you go, fruit smoothie in a mug. Is that what you put your fruit smoothie in? What about a smoothie bowl? Do you enjoy your smoothie bowls with your nuts and your acai seeds,
You're gonna have to try a little bit harder to get me this late in the day, Ben.
All right, Shawn, you're my last hope. Do you enjoy your breakfast cereal, your coffee in the morning?
I eat mugs and bowls for breakfast.
Great, perfect. Well, do I have the product for you because searching for news this week, as well as the Radiant Citadel being free on D&D Beyond, I also found hot off the press from Geek Native, the D&D official licensed breakfast set, including mug and bowl. And the bowl has a handle on it, so it's really a big mug as well. So if you need to get your Cheerios in the morning, this podcast not sponsored by Cheerios, and your hot coffee or OJ, Geek Native, or should I say Truffle Shuffle, have you covered. Truffle Shuffle is selling the official licensed D&D breakfast set. All right, this joke has run its course.
No, I'm sorry. No. Now we're stuck here. All right, you brought us here. We're here. The crockery, I already have questions. I was like, who decided this was a good idea? But the bowl has a handle?
Yeah, that's what I'm hung up on.
It's for soup. So you can drink your soup if you eat all the chunky bits with your spoon, and then you drink the leftover broth.
I've eaten many a soup in my life, and I've never thought to myself, if only this bowl had a handle.
Wait, Dael, have you never had soup out of a mug, like tomato soup?
But I have it out of a mug, like a sane person.
What is this but a big mug? You
make your choice in life. You drink your soup from a mug, or you have it with a bowl and a spoon. That's your choice in life.
Yeah, I'm going to declare here and now that it is canon that in the Forgotten Realms, people drink soup out of bowls with handles. That must be why.
Well, of course it is.
This is a very upsetting conversation all around.
Yeah.
No, of course it's canon. I mean, Dael, let me ask you this. Would you drink your soup out of a bowl with a handle if it's officially D&D licensed? It's got a picture of a dragon on it.
I'm already troubled by the official D&D licensed crockery. But if it had a dragon, maybe.
Well, it does. You totally, if you look at the official artwork. Put an image of a ruby pangolin in it and we'll talk. Well, the Radiant Citadel licensed merch still to come. Maybe it'll be a free content add-on when you buy the Radiant Citadel book. Yeah, I don't know. I just thought that was random and funny and reminded me of like a plate, bowl, mug, Batman combination I had when I was a little kid.
You can't get those like you know how most merch is just like, oh, it's t-shirts and we print our thing on it. You gotta make a bowl with a handle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot.
There was a decision made.
Yeah, they were in a design room.
As Shawn said, it's based on the official Faerun law that everybody drinks their soup out of handled
I'm sorry, I'm letting it go. I promise.
It's also better for a waiter. It doesn't
sound like you are, Dael.
I don't know if you've been a waiter and you've had to carry hot soup bowls before, but if I'm at a D&D themed restaurant in future, I'll be able to waiter out my soup in with the
sell
this
premise to Disneyland. They'll love it.
Speaking of merchandise, Critical Role have started their official record label, Scanlan Shorthalt Music. Come on, did I get a transition? Does that? Oh no, you're going through yeah. 7. Okay, I'll take that one. This was kind of cool. In fact, it's already out. You can go onto Spotify right now. I already tested this, and you search "Welcome to Tal'Dorei," which is the name of the soundtrack that they have already released with the sounds of Tal'Dorei. Has anybody else checked this out? James, have you had a look at this? Do you think have you
listened
enjoyed
to it 10 times already?
Oh, really?
Yes. It has been the soundtrack to my walks through the forest, which I do daily for the past week. And it served as writing soundtrack for me for the past week as well. So yes, it's a very good album, actually.
Nice.
And what's more, they have also officially granted an open license to any streamers who want to use it in their live stream D&D games, provided they give credit in their description.
That's cool.
Which I think is a fantastic sort of, I don't know, free advertising, branding opportunity for Critical Role. Given that they have D&D sourcebooks out that I know for a fact that people are streaming on Twitch.
Yeah, I feel like they probably remember as well back in the Critical Role early days. I remember that like at the start of an episode, and I could get this wrong because this is coming from my hazy memory, Matt gave out a specific thank you, I think, to CD Projekt Red for letting them use the Witcher soundtrack officially licensed, which is a great soundtrack as well, by the way. There you go.
There it is.
which is a great soundtrack as well, by the way. So I suspect there's a level of empathy going. There's a level of empathy going into that of like, yes, we understand it's hard to get fantasy music for your stream, your project, whatever it happens to be. Is it for live play streamers specifically, or is it sort of for anybody who's making D&D content?
Oh, now that I'm not too sure about. There was a tweet that came out the very day of release, and because I'm not live streaming, I only gave it a cursory glance.
Gotcha. That's fair enough.
But go to Critical Role's Twitter. You'll find the answer over there. If you're the sort of person who really needs to know the answer to that question.
Well, there might be some people.
I think it is hugely beneficial for people who are streaming their D&D games to have because it's really difficult to pull together a substantial enough sort of playlist of viable, good quality music that fits the vibe of your game. It can be really, really difficult, and you have to go through lots of different places and curate the list really carefully, and it ends up being a pretty skinny draw that you have to kind of make do with. So I think this is a huge move. I think it's going to make a real difference for people who are streaming their games in terms of creating atmosphere and bringing quality to their product, right? Because that's one of the biggest divides that you get between the high end people who have money for a production or a product or a book or whatever, and the people on the sort of low end who are trying to do it on their own, these little indie projects. If you don't have the art to make your book look good, it won't sell as much as the books that are produced by the people who have the money to pay for the art to make their book look good. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And this is the sort of D&D live stream equivalent of that. If you have the sounds, that's one step closer to, just being able to put your best foot forward and get an audience on board. And I think that's a really cool step for Critical Role to have taken.
Yeah,
I agree. Quick shout out as well to Colin McGuinness, who is the composer, I believe, on the first two tracks, who also wrote and composed and sang the song for the latest Fables 2 Pirates of the Ethereal Expanse trailer, which I think I've said it before on the podcast, just slaps. If you haven't, that is the perfect phrase for it. If you haven't heard the Pirates of the Ethereal Expanse, if you go to YouTube, I think it's Fables 2 Pirates of the Ethereal Expanse cinematic trailer, I think is the name of the video. I'll put a link up in the YouTube version of this if you haven't listened to it. It's really fantastic. We keep blasting it in the office over and over again. Thank you, Ghostfire Official, for putting it in the Twitch chat. Speaking of things in the Twitch chat, there might be questions there. I haven't been paying that close attention, but you know where we have got questions? Our email address, which is it's podcast@ghostfiregaming.com. Nice middle of the road transition there for you. Podcast@ghostfiregaming.com. Sorry, I'm getting all the addresses mixed up in my head now. And this question, which came in from Frederick, asking how to handle time travel in a D&D or, miscellaneous tabletop RPG context. Their specific party needs to go forward into the future to get a spent ring of wishes to bring back into the past, to then charge the ring, to then use it, which I assume is then going to be thieved by themselves at some point in their future timeline. Which is very clever. Bit of a grandfather paradox, but very clever.
Love it.
Shawn, how do you handle time travel? Have you handled time travel?
I have. I've handled it very, very poorly mostly. And a couple really quick points is one, having the characters travel forward in time is always much easier than having them travel backward in time for that reason that Ben just mentioned. The second thing is time travel works very well in clever science fiction and fantasy. Doctor Who handles time travel usually very well because there are writers who control every single character and every single heartbeat that goes on in that story. As soon as you introduce the randomness of players to your time travel story, everything will go wrong quickly, even without them trying to make things go wrong quickly. And if they're trying to make things go wrong quickly, they could really make things go wrong.
And I've been watching a lot of Star Trek lately, which has more than its fair share of time travel episodes, which has got me thinking about the two main types of time travel. There's closed loop time travel, grandfather paradox, and there's split timeline time travel. Now, split timeline time travel has the potential to work very, very well in D&D because all of a sudden you've butterfly affected your way into a completely different timeline where you don't have to worry about consistency or anything like that. But if you're trying to pull off a very clever closed loop situation like our questioner is, good luck. Just like exactly what Shawn said, the wheels will fall off the cart very quickly unless you keep a really tight handle on your players, and that comes with its own massive set of problems.
I agree. I am definitely also of the school. When I approach time travel in D&D, I like to call it the charmed approach, because if anyone is familiar with the television series Charmed, frequently throughout the series, I would say, they will have an episode where one of the main characters ends up in a dark future timeline where things are terrible because of, X event that happened that they have to look out for. It's like, oh no, well, if I have to stop them from doing this so that this future never happens. And the whole plot of the episode or if you're lucky, double episode, ends up being about how do I get back to my own time, which I think is very easy to do in D&D and also extremely useful to do in D&D. If you can, I think it's fun to take one character out and have everyone else be in on the secret. I think it's cool to have, decide that your sorcerer is going to go forward in time and have a meeting with every other player and say, all right, it's 5 years in the future. The demons have taken over the country. Tell me what's happened to your characters. And someone shows up with an eye patch and someone, so-and-so's dead. So that player comes up with a different character for this session or whatever, like they can collaborate with you on this dark future timeline, and you can use it to kind of give the players spoilers of what's going to come up down the line. You can use a trip into the future, an incidental trip into the future, to reveal that there's going to be some dark ritual that summons this demon army. And then they go back into the past, and that's their goal now. They have to try and figure out when this ritual is going to take place and stop it before it happens. And I think that is a perfect match for a D&D game. I think it's really easy to pull off. But then when you get to the closed loop stuff, which I think that this premise that has been written in about is so good. I love it. I really, really do. And I think that really you can get away with a lot by wrapping it up in language that sort of vaguely seems to make sense. Because time travel is not real. You can really, if someone questions, you can be like, oh, well, obviously, look, time travel wants to protect the time traveler. So, yes, you can affect things in the past, but ultimately none of them can have enough of an effect that the time traveler never will have gone back, because that would collapse time, and time doesn't want that. You can get your patter ready. You prestidigitate this, and everyone will just be like, yeah, makes sense.
In third edition D&D, there are a group of supernatural constructs called the Inevitables that punish transgressors who try and cheat death and break supernatural oaths and things like that. 5e has one, the Marut, that kind of got promoted to CR20 plus high heaven. There's none of them are specifically about time travel as far as I remember, but I think you could kind of have the time cops show up if you want to do something like this. And it dovetails great with Dael's explanation. If you think of these guys as like time antibodies, once you started making tears in the timeline, they're like, oh, well, we need to get rid of this virus fast, and then we can go to work on stitching everything right back up again.
I'm reminded, I've always wanted to run a dungeon, spoilers for my players, and I've never been able to do it. I've never found like the place to do it within a campaign. But Dishonored 2 had a really excellent dungeon level kind of space that you could explore, which was split between 2 times. And the fundamental concept was, I'm approaching a doorway, but I can't get through because the house is half collapsed in this doorway. So I need to find a rift through time to go into the past when the doorway was repaired, and then I can walk through it. And then there might be another obstacle, or there might be other enemies or something like that you have to jump between the two timelines. But you could do things like jump into the past timeline and do something that when you went back into the future timeline, something was all different because you changed it in the past, which I thought was a very clever way of constructing a dungeon, or a very clever way of constructing sort of like a puzzle dungeon, if you will. And I've wanted to do a dungeon with that exact conceit, down to the fact that the players can fight a different version of the final boss of the dungeon, depending on which timeline they want to be in when they go and fight that boss. And maybe they were, a good person in the past, and something happened along the timeline that now they're a villain or a monster in the future. And so it's like, can you change their mind or something like that? Yeah, exactly.
That's one of those things that it works really well in video games because you have that very tight control. It works well in stories. But putting the players into a position where they can affect something, unless you keep it very short, very small, give them a limited number of seconds to change things as opposed to days or weeks or months to change things, then you are controlling it to the best of your ability. And hopefully the players will appreciate the wit of it without feeling like you are limiting what their imaginations could do with it.
That's a really great idea, Shawn. Let their time travel be in like the duration of combat rounds and see what they can do with it.
Yeah. Especially in the example that Ben gave. Players love that. I've seen it done many times. There's the impossible wall in front of you. Oh, we can jump back in time for just a few seconds to before the wall was built to put a flaw into it, or while the wall was being built to put a flaw into it that we can then exploit. But if you give too much leeway, it can go very wrong, and it just turns into a horrible, kludgy, you're fixing things on the fly that are unfixable.
This is probably a very slapdash solution to this. That could probably cause things to go wrong catastrophically. I found this on Pinterest years ago, and it was basically similar to what you were talking about, James, in terms of the inevitables, time cops style constructs. And I was like, well, this is great because what I can do is these dudes start to realize that there's some problem with the timeline, that people are jumping back and forth and affecting them. So they'll be the time limit themselves. They'll sort of show up and start to harass the party if they start to take too long in one timeline or another. So I think you need to do it with a low level party that aren't going to have too crazy spells, so that you can kind of control the scope of what they're capable of a little bit. But if they start to mess around too much, then the Marat shows up and then they're in trouble. So
this is I mean, not quite the same as what we're talking about, but a while ago I with the help of my Twitch chat devised a highly experimental and theoretical monster. That the whole premise of the encounter was that it exists on a time fold. So you're in the one place, but the future and the present are sort of stacked on top of each other. So you can kind of fall between them. And there were little elements of the encounter that involved things like, in the future, this is a shipwreck. So if you are in the future timeline fighting this beast, and you get thrown and you fall through this hole in the side of the ship, you'll get knocked into the present timeline or the past timeline where there is a wall there to stop you, because there both is and isn't a hole in that wall. And that sort of paradox forces you to keep flitting between timelines. And I don't know, I think there's a lot of room to just mess around because none of it makes sense anyway. So do something fun with it. I think that's the core of it if you're dealing with time travel.
Now that I think about it, in my current campaign, I'm doing something that resembles time travel, but prevents all of this sort of predestination, timeline breaking stuff from happening. Because my big bad is a very long-lived vampire. And a lot of the stuff a lot of her great evil deeds happened a very long time ago before the campaign began. And this whole campaign I've been kind of hand-wringing about, like, I can't just keep telling my players that she's a bad guy. And like, she's done some bad stuff in the present, but there's a lot of cool stuff that I've written into the backstory that I really want them to see. And what I've done, if they want to have a hope of beating her in the present, they'll need to learn about her weaknesses as she gained them in the past. In order to allow them to go back into the past, I've basically stolen a page from J.K. Rowling's book, as many problems as I have with her these days, and basically allow them to dive into the memories of the villain or her allies. And these memories are like, you can mess around in them, you can totally screw them up, and they'll try and stretch with you as far as they can. But at a certain point, the memory will snap, and you'll be like, oh, you've deviated incredibly far from the truth. And even though you haven't affected the future, you got to see a snapshot of the past.
Like the animus desynchronization in the early Assassin's Creed games.
Yes, like the Assassin's Creed games.
Where the idea in those games was that, like, if you died or whatever, that's not what happened in the past. It's just that you and your brain have gone off in a different direction from what actually happened. So you got desynchronized, you have to try again. I really like that. Also, that is reminiscent to me, maybe you disagree, with stuff that happens towards the end of Call of the Netherdeep. Just saying, delving into some memories.
Wild how I was coming up with these ideas at the exact same time.
I ran something kind of similar a few years ago where the idea, I used an elder brain stat block, but the idea was it was an old wizard that had a spell gone wrong. And so they were very old. They weren't a lich, but they were very old, and then a spell went wrong and they turned into a giant brain that was in control of this giant citadel, which everybody believed was haunted. It wasn't haunted. It was, yeah, exactly. You got to be careful. This is, as Shawn knows, with arcane anomalies from the Monster Grimoire.
I know you were going to say because Shawn is a giant brain.
Well, she, maybe not literally, but metaphysically. And so the idea was that the party had to jump through the different memories of this giant brain as it was flitting them around, while mind flayers were chasing them through the memories because the mind flayers wanted to eat the giant brain because it was giant. The problem with that was it worked really, really well for the first party I ran it for, because they were my home group and they were very invested in the lore of my world. And so they were understanding the references and the stuff that didn't make sense. And they were sort of getting the clues that the history as their characters understood it wasn't quite the history as it happened, as it was being told by this elder brain. And then the second time I ran it, it was just spaghetti, because the players weren't, and they didn't need to be, but because the players weren't invested in the world, it was like, yeah, they've no clue what's going on here. I haven't done a very good job of priming them for it. This was a very time and place sort of dungeon. I don't think I will ever be able to run it again.
That's a good segue.
Speaking of things that I will definitely do again, I will definitely record the Eldritch Lorecast next week, because we will be back next week for another episode of the Eldritch Lorecast. We are here on Twitch every week from now on as well, unless you hear otherwise, because we need to record in advance or something like that.
I can't believe the hour's already gone. I can't believe.
This one blazed by.
Really did.
I do. I have been watching the time tick down, and I have been sad. I was like, oh, we're not going to get to poor Scott's question. But next week, Scott, your question is going to come up. But I always overstack the run sheet, so because I'm paranoid about running out of stuff to talk about. Anyway, segueing back to the end of the episode, speaking of things that you can send us, you can send an email to podcast@ghostfiregaming.com if you want your question answered. You can come hang out on Twitch on Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9 a.m. on Tuesday, Australian Eastern Standard Time. Hopefully that's enough time zones for you. Come hang out, leave us a question in the chat if you wish to there, or otherwise give us a 5-star rating or a thumbs up or whatever it is on the platform you're listening on, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, whatever it happens to be. All of that are like souls for the growing lich that is the Eldritch Lorecast. Make us stronger. Otherwise, I've been Ben Byrne here with Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, James Hake, and I'll catch you all next week. Seamless transition.
Sinister.
Alarming.
Those are my favorites.
Seamless.
We talk about heading into a dark future where there's betrayals and people have become villains.